The year is 1993. Kurt Cobain is still alive, Jurassic Park is out in theaters, and one of my favorite games is about to be released. I was also born this year, so I wouldn't know about or play this game until a few years later. During this time, my family was behind a generation when it came to video game consoles. So while everyone else had a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis, we had to settle for the original Nintendo Entertainment System. The only games I remember us having was Duck Hunt, Super Mario Bros., Super Mario Bros. 3, and Dirty Harry. And while I enjoyed most of these games, I couldn't really beat them. I was a young child, and Super Mario Bros. 3 was just a little too hard for me. Damn that Ice World! When I was that age, I enjoyed video games, but I wouldn't really say that I had a passion for them. This changed after my dad came home one day with a certain video game. A video game that would become instrumental in turning me into a fan of the medium. This video game is Kirby's Adventure. I consider Kirby's Adventure to be the greatest NES game ever made. The sprites, the music, the power-ups, the boss battles, everything about this game just screams excellence. But I think the most important and defining feature of Kirby's Adventure is its difficulty. Kirby's Adventure is not a hard game in the slightest. You can breeze through the game in about 2 or 3 hours. But for a 5-year-old child, an easy game was exactly what I needed. I couldn't take losing to the angry sun anymore. I needed a video game that I could finish. I needed a win under my belt. I needed Kirby's Adventure. I feel like I would have lost interest in video games as a kid if all I felt was failure. But having a game like Kirby's Adventure, one which I was able to complete, taught me how rewarding video games could be. However, just because Kirby's Adventure is easy and I was able to finish it doesn't make it a good game. It's everything else that surrounds Kirby's Adventure, which makes it such an unforgettable experience and one of the top NES games. As soon as you turn on your NES, you are greeted to a cutscene where you learn how to draw Kirby. This has to be one of the most ambitious introductions for an NES game. Also, unlike most NES games where the title screens are black, this one is white, giving the game a more light-hearted atmosphere from the get-go. A major advantage Kirby had over the other NES games in my collection was that you were able to actually save your progress. Being able to shut off your console and continue playing your save file was a big game changer back in the day. I wonder if my family would have been able to beat Super Mario Bros. 3 if we were only able to save our progress and not have to redo the same worlds every time we played. If you wait a while on the title screen, you'll be shown a demo of how to play. If you wait for the demo to finish, you are then introduced to this game's story. Our copy of Kirby's Adventure was the Canadian-French version, so I had no idea what was going on since all the text was written in French and I don't understand French. But what pretty much happens is the following. One day, the inhabitants of Dreamland weren't able to dream anymore, so our titular hero goes to the Dream Spring, which is a fountain that produces dreams and hope. Kirby discovers that King Dedede broke the Star Rod, which powers the Dream Spring, so now Kirby needs to travel around Dreamland, collect the fragments of the Star Rod, which are now being held by King Dedede's friends. The story is simple, but effective, and to even get a cutscene explaining what's going on in an NES game is pretty damn impressive. And I just adore the sprite images that accompany the story. This King Dedede one is my favorite. Once you select a save file and begin the game, you are shown a small cutscene to introduce you to the first world. There's one of these cutscenes for every one of the 7 worlds you'll be visiting, and these cutscenes really give Kirby's Adventure its own personality. Masahiro Sakurai, best known for being the director of the Super Smash Bros. Series, is also this game's director, so it makes sense that these cutscenes exist. Sakurai's games always just have this certain charm to them, and you can just feel the dedication and love he has for the games he creates. That's what these intro-world cutscenes show me. They don't need to exist, they don't add anything significant to the game, but they're here purely because Sakurai and his team wanted to make them. After you watch or skip the intro world cutscene, you'll enter the Overworld map. In this map, you'll find different levels, mini-games, and other goodies. This is also the first chance the player gets to control Kirby. You're able to try out Kirby's moveset before you enter a level, which is a great way for kids to familiarize themselves before they have to face any danger. Kirby can jump, crouch, fly infinitely, and is able to suck in enemies and objects. Kirby's Adventure is a simple 2D platformer where you go through various levels, fighting enemies, and discovering secrets. After completing a set of levels, the player must then defeat a boss in order to reach the next world. I didn't know this as a child, but Kirby's Adventure is actually a sequel to the Game Boy game Kirby's Dream Land. In that game, you were also able to suck up enemies and objects, but Kirby's Adventure added one special feature that now defines Kirby. The copy ability was added in this game. If Kirby sucks up a certain type of enemy, he's able to gain their ability. 25 unique power-ups were available to the player. The only other game I really played was Mario 3, and that game only had a few power-ups, but Kirby's Adventure had like 3 times as much. Some of my favorites include Fireball, Freeze, Crash, Wheel, and Hammer. And of course UFO, the greatest power-up in any video game. These power-ups really gives the player options on how they want to take on levels and how to fight the various bosses they will be encountering. Some of the power-ups are redundant, such as having both an ice and freeze power-up, but for the most part, every power-up felt unique. It's interesting to see how future games fuse some of these power-ups together into just one general power-up. A really cool feature in this game is if Kirby sucks up 2 enemies that can grant him an ability at the same time, a roulette will appear and the player can stop it to get a random ability. If the player doesn't stop the roulette, the game will just give them a random power-up. The power-ups really elevate Kirby's Adventure to be one of the most impressive NES games. I don't think there's any other NES title that comes close to this type of gameplay style selection. The other power that sets Kirby apart from his other 8-bit contemporaries is his ability to fly. Kirby is able to fly for an infinite amount of time, and this definitely makes the game an easier experience, but I feel like the levels are crafted around this mechanic, so being able to fly never feels too overpowered. Most of the time, Kirby is in smaller enclosed spaces where flying is not very useful. Take this area for example. You need to dodge all these Gordos, and sure, you could try to fly through them all, but platforming is a more reliable option. Or this section, where you will most likely get damaged if you decide to fly across these spikes instead of using the Parasol power-up. Even against bosses and mini-bosses, I feel like flying is just a useful tool in order to defend against the boss. You still need to find the opportune moment to attack. Kirby also has a few items that can help him on his journey. Maxim Tomatoes and Pep Drink heal Kirby, while Invincible Candy turns Kirby into an unstoppable pink force of nature. The gameplay for Kirby's Adventure is fun and simple, and the levels themselves are all incredibly atmospheric and unique. Every world brings a different type of setting to the game, and this gives each area its own distinct feel. Vegetable Valley begins as a simple introduction to the world of Kirby with a bright atmosphere, but ends with a journey through the dark woods. Ice Cream Island is a beautiful ocean-themed world that fills you with chill vibes. Butter Building is a large tower that you just continue to scale with every level. Grape Garden is a melancholic journey through a world of clouds, while Yogurt Yard has Kirby traveling through a dangerous mountainside. Orange Ocean is exactly what the name suggests, and Rainbow Resort has some of the most beautifully crafted levels on the NES. Each one of these worlds is vastly unique compared to one another, and by the end of it, you truly feel like you've gone on an adventure. The overworld maps are filled to the brim with extra rooms that lead to minigames or other areas. There are 3 minigames the player can participate in. The first one has Kirby dodging bombs and eating eggs. The second is a crane game where you try to collect Kirbys. The last minigame has you face 5 opponents in a shootout. You need to press the A button as quick as you can when prompted before your opponent shoots you first. I still have never won this minigame. Dedede always shoots me first. Winning at these minigames grants the player extra lives. Most of the overworlds include a museum where you can find enemies that you can easily suck up if you need a certain power-up. There's also the arena where you can fight a mini-boss to retrieve their power-up. And the final doors found in the overworld are the Warp Star stations. Entering this area allows you to easily warp to another overworld map without having to backtrack through various doors. A lot of these minigame rooms are hidden on the overworld and must be unlocked by finding hidden switches in levels. Some of these switches need the use of Kirby's power-ups to unlock them, and that's where the difficulty for Kirby's Adventure comes in. 100%ing the game does take some clever problem solving and a complete understanding of how to use Kirby's power-up system. This switch on the pirate ship is what I consider the hardest secret to find in the game. There are just too many memorable moments from Kirby's Adventure, such as when Kirby explores an airship, or when you first encounter a group of UFOs. But I think the moment that sticks out for everyone is the final level of the game, where the game turns black and white. As I stated before, I didn't know Kirby's Dream Land existed, so I just thought this was just a unique level idea. It's only later on in my life that I discovered that this was an homage to Kirby's Dream Land. The game is just filled with these little moments that culminate into an unforgettable 8-bit experience. A very simple feature that I adore is that on the Overworld map, the background for the level doors reflect what the level is going to be. Take Ice Cream Island's 4th level for example. You have been going through a bunch of tropical inspired levels, but the level is higher up on the Overworld map and is surrounded by a cloud sprite, so the level is going to reflect that. It's such a simple feature, but gives the game even more charm. Another aspect that makes these levels such a joy to explore is because of Kirby's Adventure's incredible soundtrack. The music always reflects the atmosphere of the level, which helps immerse the player into these 8-bit environments. Forest Trail makes you feel like you're exploring some uncharted area, Cloud Tops transports you into a relaxing dream, while Island Paradise pulls off the tropical mood so perfectly. But my all-time favorite song is Starry Sky, which is the theme for Rainbow Resort. It has to be my favorite song on the NES. The song is so calm, and it feels like a lullaby, which fits in perfectly with the setting of the final world, which is plastered with a dreamlike aesthetic. The music for Kirby's Adventure is just so iconic to me, and I think it rivals other great NES soundtracks like Silver Surfer and the Mega Man games. The last aspect that really makes Kirby's Adventure's levels stand out are the incredible sprites. I consider the sprite work for Kirby's Adventure to be the best the NES has to offer. Everything is just so big and detailed. Of course, having such big sprites makes the platforming much easier. Kirby has plenty of leeway when jumping from platform to platform, but I think the trade-off is worth it. We might get easier platforming, but we also get the most beautifully created areas in an NES game. Speaking about beautiful sprites, take a look at these enemies. There is such a large and varied collection of baddies to face in this game. You've got the classic Waddle Dees and Waddle Doos, the horrific Scarfy and the indestructible Gordo, the energetic Starman and the dangerous Flamer. And we can't forget about Cool Spook. Look how cool he is. This is just a small selection of the basic enemies you'll need to fight. There's also a selection of mini-bosses that show up throughout your adventure. These villains have much more detailed sprites, and some of them even give unique power-ups. Some of my favorites include Bonkers, a monkey who wields a giant hammer. There's also the incredibly dumb-witted Fire Lion, who has a habit of smashing their face into the ground, and Bugsy, a giant beetle who gives you the backdrop ability. Rolling Turtle always gave me Stranger Danger vibes as a kid though. I didn't want him anywhere near me. We also get a set of impressive looking bosses. The first boss of the game, Wispy Woods, is a giant tree that takes up a third of the screen that drops apples on Kirby. I've been defeating him the same way with Freeze since I was a little kid. Paint Roller's the second world's boss and is the creator of his own demise. He'll draw objects and then you just need to spit those objects back at him. Nothing is more satisfying than sucking up a bomb he draws and then using the crash ability to completely destroy him. The next boss is a little tricky compared to the others. Kirby will be facing off against the sun and the moon. While you're fighting one of them, the other will jump into the air and attack you from above. The hardest boss for me as a child was Kracko, a giant cloud that has two phases. In the first phase, you need to escape Kracko as he chases you higher into the sky. I just had so much trouble with the first phase as a kid. I had difficulties using the high jump power up, so I would ignore it, and this led to Kracko chasing after me, and I would die. Eventually, I learned how to properly use the high jump power up and defeat Kracko. This was the moment where I first felt the sense of pride for overcoming a challenge in a video game, and for that, Kracko remains one of my favorite bosses in gaming. The next boss, however, is quite the pushover if you take your time and plan your attacks. You need to defeat Heavy Mole before they get too far with their excavation. Besides the bosses, the most memorable enemies have to be the Meta Knights, a group of warriors who show up several times throughout the game. You'll be playing a level, and then all of a sudden, you'll enter an area where you'll have to fight a horde of these guys. At the end of the 6th world, you finally get to face the leader of this army. It's the mysterious and worst team name creator, Meta Knight. What occurs next is the single coolest moment of any video game, ever. You're unable to use any other weapon and must face Meta Knight in one-on-one sword combat. It's such a legendary fight that gives so much personality to Meta Knight without him uttering a single word. He refuses to attack you until you pick up the sword. This is going to be a fair battle. After you defeat Meta Knight, you break his mask and reveal that he looks like Kirby. This was mind-blowing as a child. What does this all mean? Was Meta Knight actually a good guy all along, and he was just preparing me for the trials ahead? This small reveal helped Kirby's adventure feel like it had more substance. There was more to this simple adventure than initially seen. I wanted to discover the truth about Meta Knight, but it's been 30 years, and we still don't know what this guy's deal is. After our amazing battle with Meta Knight, the next boss we face is the big bad himself, King Dedede. To my surprise, Dedede is a fun boss battle, and was able to maintain the same tone that the Meta Knight fight had. While Meta Knight forced you to use the sword ability, King Dedede's boss battle forces you to fight a more intense version of yourself. King Dedede is able to fly and suck like Kirby, and has abilities that are similar to the high jump and hammer power-ups. This battle feels like a proper finale to your adventure, with you using all your abilities against a similar opponent. After you defeat King Dedede, you learn that he was actually helping Kirby. It turns out the Dream Spring was being corrupted by this evil being called the Nightmare. King Dedede destroyed the Star Rod in order to keep Nightmare captive in the Dream Spring. But since Kirby has returned the Star Rod to the Dream Spring, Nightmare is able to escape. King Dedede then launches Kirby and the Star Rod into space, and the true final battle begins. The final battle is split into two parts. The first section has Kirby using the Star Rod to shoot Nightmare's first form. You need to dodge his projectiles while you shoot stars at his orb-shaped body. This part of the battle was difficult for me as a child, since you need to defeat Nightmare in a certain amount of time. After you defeat his initial incarnation and land on the moon, you face Nightmare's true form. Nightmare's sprite is probably the most impressive throughout the game. His main body is continuously spinning, and he also has so many different battle animations. He's a great final boss for the game, and the atmosphere for the battle just heightens how impressive this fight actually is. The screen is constantly scrolling through space while this rocking song is playing in the background. When you finally defeat Nightmare, a part of the moon explodes and Kirby returns the Star Rod to the Dream Spring. Turns out, King Dedede is a pretty nice guy. Then the credits begin while we watch the developers use funky power-ups to beat the bosses. I always wanted to use the throw power-up against Wispy Woods. After you finish the game, your adventure isn't over yet. You can try to find all the secret switches and reach 100% completion. Doing so unlocks a second adventure where you cannot save, and Kirby only has 3 slivers of health instead of 6. You could also try to find the secret mini-boss rush, where you fight stronger versions of the mini-bosses. Or you could look for even more secrets, probably some I don't even know about yet. Kirby's Adventure truly is one of the best on the NES. The art style, music, and power-up system are in a class of its own. No other NES game comes close to this sort of quality experience. I'm so grateful I got to grow up with this game. It taught me how amazing video games are, and without it, I probably wouldn't have loved video games as much as I do today. Even after all these years, Kirby's Adventure remains tied for my favorite video game of all time. So, I would like to thank HAL Laboratory for creating such an amazing, incredible game, and I want to thank you for watching. I hope to see you all next time.